Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Davis, and I am an education consultant at Region 8 in Northeast Texas, the very northeast corner of Texas. And so I work to help uh, with K-12 teachers and also administrators and anything related to ESL teaching as well as compliance with Texas Education Agency. I'm also a PhD student here at East Texas A&M University. And a couple of years ago, I became interested in crip linguistics and focusing more on neurodiversity. And here recently, I've narrowed that focus even more into looking into autism, and specifically at the intersection of the impact on language of bilingual autistic individuals. So we're going to look through some things that I found in some of my recent research and some of my previous research in general neurodiversity studies. I'm doing a bit on language development and then some kind of more like tips and tricks for teaching. And then feel free if you have any questions or anything to add in anytime, just let me know. And do just let me know because I probably won't be watching the chat. So feel free, just come on off and and we can talk about it. So during my first paper, I found different definitions and kind of looking at the who at the bottom, like different who's included and who's not. I've seen everything from even like bipolar included in neurodiverse, but this is more of a working definition from the Cleveland Clinic, and it stresses that it's a non-medical term and it looks at individuals with different strengths and different struggles. The brain develops differently or works differently from a typical brain development. And they have, like I say, different strengths and struggles from neurotypical development. So, in general, we're talking, and it is a very huge umbrella of autism spectrum disorder, generally known as ASD, um, and which in itself, just the ASD is very broad and varied, but we're looking at right now the broad umbrella of neurotypical or neurodiverse learners and individuals. We have ADHD, which is attention deficit disorder, dyslexia. So that would, deal with difficulty and reading. Dysgraphia is with writing, and dyscalculia would be with numbers, and Tourette syndrome. So this was the most accurate and the one that I saw the most to include these conditions, and this was from the Cleveland Clinic. So what I'm going to talk about today is a bit about the neurodiverse language development in the first language. Then we're going to look at some general teaching considerations for when you're teaching language, a second language specifically, to neurodiverse students, and then some that would be some general educational tools, and then some more domain-specific domains such as listening, speaking, reading, and writing for learning. That really drills it down to exactly what we're doing here in this program and teaching. It doesn't, I'm not expanding on too much, just some very specific, a few tips and tools that are including apps and things like that that will help with those learners in those areas of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. One of the first things to consider with this is starting at infancy, and or it can be seen as early as then. So this graphic on the left is showing autistic or ADHD or someone who is a combination of both is either polytropic or monotropic. And these are two different attention styles. So they have the metaphor of the water fountain, which I think is interesting. So on the left, you see the whole graphic on the left, and then the white part, the polytropism, is more of your neurotypical, and they can be aroused doing many different things at the same time, distributing focus widely with less intensity and depth. Okay. And then on the right, you have this more like a water hose, more focused. It says it flows deeply in fewer active channels at one time, like a garden hose. And it can get them into that flow state. They're really they're hyper focused on one area. So monotropism is more common in especially with ADHD and autistic individuals. And on the right is a different graphic that says, it's looking at the all-consuming hyper focus. And so this is something that can be evident from infancy and affect their language development. I'm going to also share the deck so that you can have a look at any of this again. And I also have, why is it doing that? I also have links within and a few videos that you can watch on your own. So with these monotropic, one at a time, or polytropic, many, these ideas on attention, we think about, well, how does that impact language input? Or what can a parent or caregiver do for an infant who is showing some of these signs? So you follow the child's focus of attention rather than trying to redirect it to what it is you want them to say or do. Language learning can still occur with the input with the caregiver is sharing. It aligns with the child's actual focus, even if that differs from neurotypical patterns. So they're still learning and developing. It's just going to look a bit different. And again, it will need to be kind of reactive to the interest of the child. Okay, so within our with the gait, there's social gating is like a theory that children, excuse me, neurotypical children are developing language, and they are interacting only when they are in a social engagement with another meaningful person. Like an adult generally can be another child, but this is a social interaction. So so now we have this cool article, which I have resources listed at the end, found that many preschoolers with this is the autism spectrum disorder yes, it showed a preference for non-speech analogs like computer generated sounds over mother ease, which is when you use your soothing tones and your melody with your voice. So then this finding suggests that for these infants that there was no social gating. It wasn't social, there was a systematic gating. So thinking of a social motivation, instead of a deficit in ability, there's a difference in the motivation. If an infant finds a social signals like faces or high-pitched noises overwhelming or unpredictable, they will naturally filter them out to focus on what is patterned and what is predictable. So that's just an interesting find in, again, early childhood, infancy to preschoolers on preferences for input of sounds. It's not necessarily a social thing. Also closely related to that is sensory sensitivities and how that will impact the input of attention and processing. Because input is a sensory experience. And here it says, like facial movements and gestures, sometimes tactile involvement as well. So the sensory processing differences shape what aspects of this input are going to be foregrounded or backgrounded. I have more details. This is sort of an overview, and this has a bit more of the details. So here again, we're looking specifically at autism, but this can also go to some other areas of neurodiversity. So an infant with ASD and a noisy daycare may be given the same input but process less language than the same child in a quiet, predictable environment. Whereas if the child did not have ASD and they were engaged socially with an adult, they would not have this big of a difference between the noisy and quiet space. Some children may focus on non-speech aspects of the auditory environment, and we're going to talk just a little bit about that. But almost like even if it's not the language, it can be some of the cadence or these melodies within words. So they're developing strong auditory processing and maybe less visual. And that kind of goes to the last bullet, that visual sensitivities can affect whether a child looks at faces or not and engages in eye contact, so that they can shift to rely only on auditory processing and less on anything visual, which is not uncommon as they grow and develop. So we're not going to watch this video, but this is if someone is interested in any of these early childhood um, differences in language development, this is a video that you can watch if you're interested of Patricia Kuhl's TED Talk. So there's everything I mentioned so far is apparent in the first year before they're actually diagnosed, um, and how the caregiver responds makes a difference in the language development. Parents can adapt their interaction style to the child's attention patterns, and they can maintain effective communication. And then it says understanding these differences should inform intervention, and that it means speech pathology, speech therapy, because many of the articles that are out there are talking about language development and autism. They're going to be mostly from the School of Speech Language Pathology. So so understanding these differences can help to support how they're naturally learning rather than trying to normalize their behavior or make it look different than what it is. Um, and then also like the sensory environment is a part of it. It is shaping what language input is accessible for the student, for the baby in this situation. Okay. So that was just kind of an overview of the infancy years. This is a different look at it at the stages, and this is so interesting to me. Okay, so we have with the babies, and then how they develop into complex sentences. Pre-linguistic stage is just going to be sounds like mama, mama, dada, those kinds of things, baba. And then moving into one word, dog, cat, two word, dog, run, to the telegraphic speech that's just putting together very short, choppy sentences that are not grammatically correct. And then moving into, as they get closer to three, complex sentences and more vocabulary and more different ways to build sentences. So this is your typical development. Okay, so what we see in a neurodiverse language development is often you have echolalia, which is this involuntary repetitions of words or phrases, such as "There's a snake in my boot." Like what Woody from Toy Story would say. And so maybe the child's like Uncle Joe gave him a Woody toy at one time, and he saw on on the TV, or he can pull the string and he hears there's a snake in my boot. Well, then that's maybe has a very special meaning for that child. So why are they repeating these phrases? It says it can serve several purposes. It can be a way to communicate. They can be actually communicating, this is my Uncle Joe, or here's my Uncle Joe, he's coming. It can also serve as a self-stimulation or even self-soothing, and it can help them with processing language. It can be immediately after they hear it, like if they heard it, if they pulled the string and heard Woody say it, or if they saw it on TV, or it can be delayed. They've heard it later on. Okay, so the blue box I think is so interesting because I didn't really realize this till I started looking into it. Is this echolalia can be a normal part of language development. So all of us and all of our babies can do this while they're developing language, and they're playing with it and they're chewing on it and figuring it out. But then if it goes beyond 3 years, then there could be some underlying neurological issue. Okay, this is a video, and he also, another thing with echolalia is they again like the melodies and the sound, the cadence in the language more than the actual words. This boy is gonna kind of just repeat what sounds kind of like what mom's saying, and this one's gonna just basically answer. It's short. Let's see if we can watch it.
Popcorn, do you want more?
Gamma,
Ollie, do you want more, darling?
gamma, gamma,
Do you want more?
gamma.
Yes, please.
No, please.
All right. Do you want more?
Yep.
All right. You can grab some.
Yep. So that's just an example of the repeating. Oh, good Lord. All right, there we go. So then we're going to look at, this is generally called Gestalt language processing, or GLP, which is a learning style or how the child perceives the language, starting with a big chunk, like there's a snake in my boot, and repeating that versus the typical sounds to words to phrases. So that's the Gestalt learning process. And echolalia is the act of this doing this speech pattern or behavior, and it's when they're repeating the sounds. So they're very closely the same. So I put the original stages of language development for neurotypical back on here, and then we have the Gestalt language processing, which Dr. Marge Blanc, who is again a speech pathologist, she developed these natural language acquisition stages, so that instead of starting with your sounds, ba ba ba, you start with a script, a song, a whole phrase, and sentence. Almost like, do you want to build a snowman? So they start with all of that instead of building up, right? They start with the big one. So then working with a qualified speech pathologist, they go through mitigations. They pieces, mix and match, they start to take it apart. Build a snowman. Come on, let's go. So they start to take it apart. To stage 3, then they can pull apart single words and snowman and start to combine it with other words to create a more original speech rather than a repetition. And then they're going to start making their original phrases once they get to stage 4. Phrases to sentences, and then to the complete complex grammar. Okay. And Dr. Marge Blanc has developed this, and she also has a website, and if this is something that you're interested in, there's many videos and things out there, and I have that listed at the end as well. This is just kind of an overview of what she has developed of the stages of natural language acquisition, and she calls what we would say neurotypical language development analytical. So basic units are, single words. You start with your phonemes. You just move up, from sounds to words to putting two words together. Intonation develops later, and single words have meaning. Okay, so this is very common. Okay, Gestalt and with the chunks, like do you want to build a snowman? That is called a Gestalt. So the basic unit are chunks or phrases, and word production comes later as they develop it. Intonation is first. They like the sound. These are known as intonation babies, almost as we saw with the little boy with the popcorn, like wanting that to copy the sound that mom was saying. Uh, Chunks can be of more than one word carry the meaning. The whole phrase carries meaning, and it may not be anything about a snake or a boot or a snowman. It can have a very different meaning. Um, so this it says it is less talked about but equally valid. This pathway to language development. Okay, so this is a comparison. So now we get to a little bit of a debate. So we have our clinician or our speech therapist versus linguists, right? So the speech pathologist argues that language development is not universal, linear, doesn't follow that path. So the critics say of her stages, critics of Blanc's stages of natural language acquisition argue that while it's nice and it's good, and they like the empathy, but the science is missing. So let's have a look. Here's a couple of, and these are brand new, like 2024 and 25. So this is a new and relevant conversation that's happening out there. Um, they the they argue that the Gestalt language processing is a pseudo-scientific framework. Beals claims it's biologically and linguistically implausible to process a long string of sounds without any phonetic or word level analysis. So that's one argument. And the other one, Lorraine Banker et al. Say their concerns with this deal with the Gestalt model is that it presumes incompetence by assuming that children don't understand individual words within their scripts, which they very well may. So these are some arguments, and I don't have an answer because it's just still kind of being talked about, but it's very interesting. So if this is something that you would like to follow, I do too. So we can definitely connect. I'm watching that one. As we're moving on, we're moving out of the language development. We're going to talk some about going to school and things like that. Different does not mean deficient. So there are variations in the developmental pathways. You know, there's they're not failures to typical development. Okay, so gaze or that eye contact is one channel for information, but not the only one. And children with ASD, autism may be, they may be more of the audio processors than visual. Neurodivergent infants are active learners using different strategies and attending to different aspects of their environment. Language development happens, but the pathway may look different. So they're still learning. It's just a different path to get there. Okay, I'm moving into the classroom. Does anyone have any questions or comments so far? Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Okay, yeah, so this is looking at some very general considerations for neurodiverse learners, which again, this is just a very broad umbrella of different people and their abilities within each category. And we also want to bear in mind, I mean, there that everybody is different. We're just kind of looking at what research has been done. So there are some general strengths and challenges with our neurodiverse learners, and we also looked at cognitive load and specifically related to learning a second language, in person or online. And so some of the strengths, and these studies were on individuals with ASD and ADHD. They have patterns and pattern recognition, attention to detail, perceptual perceptual processing. So organized thinking, of course, on the next slide, I'm going to say that there's a tendency to be disorganized, but there are some, especially autistic individuals or individuals with autism, have extraordinary concentration back to that monotropic. And then they also get that can help with their determination and even their motivation for learning when they're interested in the task or the topic. And then on some research, and this was on ADHD, there were self-reports of open-mindedness and risk-taking. And then we look at some information on not afraid of making mistakes. And that goes right back to our Stephen Krashen and our second language acquisition, the affective filter hypothesis, so when they can lower the stress and that fear of making mistakes, anytime that the filter is lower, then the higher the learning will go in the language, the more they can practice producing in a safe environment. So that's what Krashen gave us in 1984: lower the anxiety. So if you're not afraid of making mistakes and your filter is lower, then the better your second language acquisition will be. And then Karuthinga and Christopher in 2022 added to that it is directly the job of the instructor to make that happen, to make the help, do everything that you can to make the effective filter lower as much as you can on factors outside of it, the individual. So these are definitely some benefits in students' learnings. Some of the challenges are going to be the executive functioning, and this can include study skills, time management, organization of their tasks. One examples of struggles with time management can include trouble estimating the length of time to complete tasks or staying focused for extended periods. They may find it difficult to follow deadlines for online or in-person assignments, and work on prioritizing tasks can be a challenge. I was going to say, I think I had an example. And it can also impact if they're working in a group or something like that. And then communication, always, if you're learning a second language, of course, it's all about communication. We can also see that some of our neurodiverse learners can find it difficult to engage in small talk and read social cues. This can also be from like a lack of knowledge about how and when the language should be used, and what to say and how to say it. So navigating some of those social dynamics of online interactions as well as in person, if that's whatever type of class that they're working. It can be different. Even earlier today, when I was just logging on to talk to Dr. Miller, there were only two of us, and sometimes you just talk on top of each other because you don't mean to. Online is a little bit different, so it can add some challenges to navigate some of those, and it can impact their language learning, especially their speaking development. And another big impact in the classroom, a consideration, is this cognitive load, the brain's capacity to manage input of information in a moment. So every time it's coming in, there's some interesting things. So in the classroom, in their second language classroom, there are some issues with multitasking and split attention that lowers their capacity to take in more. So we often in a ESL classroom will say, watch the video and turn on the subtitles so that you can read it and learn the language, because it's all about learning the language. But this study and it's Lecompf. It's at the end. I don't have it on this page, but it's they did a comprehensive study of online learning for this specific intersection of neurodiverse language learners, and it was watching a video along with the audio. The additional visual task of reading subtitles. The neurodiverse students were not able to process as much of the information as their neurotypical peers were. And so just another way to state that is that multiple multimedia inputs created processing complications for these learners to take in information, to take it in, create a schema, and then store it into their long memory. So having just putting across the board, we will always put on subtitles on our videos is not going to benefit everybody. There needs to be an opportunity for student agency and choice with those subtitles. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the pedagogy. Your UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, and some scaffolding to help with executive function, and again a little more talk on student agency. And I saw the lab meeting with Carrie Williams, and I know that she talked about UDL, Universal Design for Learning. There's lots of information out there, and even free videos and courses and things. And if you teach in a Texas K-12 school, and it sounds like even beyond that you're somewhat familiar with this. But the third light bulb here, I think, is really important. It's for all learners. So it's developed out of the special education department, but it is applied to all learners. You're not just saying, okay, now I'm giving this just to my 3 students who need this. It's it's a framework and a way that classes and learning is, the classes in session, the way that the lessons are delivered, and to make the learning accessible to everyone. So this is, it's sort of like a promotion on this one. This doesn't tell about it, but it is for all learners. And I think that's a main thing to keep in mind. Universal design in general is just like putting, before you bring it in, the learning part is just like adding the wheelchair ramp outside instead of just stairs, having a wheelchair ramp. Well, it's there, and it helps the person in the wheelchair, but it also helps anyone who might be delivering from UPS, pushing a baby stroller, who might temporarily be on crutches. So it's a universal design that helps everyone, and we kind of think about that with the universal design for learning as well. And so this is a proactive design, and it stands on the 3 main tenets of, there's multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And so the multiple means of engagement is the why. It provides options to motivate students, let them get different ways to engage with the learning, and that helps them become motivated and independent. Representation, it's the ways that they presenting the information in it's the how, the what of learning, and presenting that in various formats to make sure it's accessible to everyone. And then the multiple means of action and expression is the how. And again, it's flexibility and how they interact with the material and demonstrate their knowledge, allowing projects, videos, papers, things like that. So this is, again, for all students all the time, but it benefits, it starts with special ed, and that's where it was born from. But the idea is to provide this to everyone. And then I have the graphic. This is the goal of UDL is learner agency that is purposeful and reflective, resourceful, and authentic. I mean, it sounds wonderful, all kinds of wonderful words. But this is another look at the multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression. And I'll just leave it here with you. At the bottom, CAST is the hub for all things UDO if you're interested in learning more about that, and lots of free resources there. And before we dive into some of those tips and tricks for the domain specific, this is a bit of scaffolding to help with our executive functioning considerations that we were talking about earlier. So time management can be an issue. There's a couple of tools, and they're Goblin is developed, I think, by neurodiverse individuals for other ones. People who might use it might find this helpful. Let me see if I can find my this is considerations. I had some notes where and yes, it's from the autistic collaboration. Yes, there and it breaks down your work into a series of small tasks to help complete your goals or larger tasks. And Todoist is similar, and it is these are both free, and I think that have some in-app purchases or level up. But Todoist is helps you organize your workload, and it also follows up with emails, and so there's ways to help you get organized and work with the time management. And then of course working with your office of special needs, that at any level of education, but there's many things that can be done for you. And another idea that was born out of accessibility studies at a college level, where it may be a bit more relevant or able to happen, is crip time. Recognizes that people will arrive at various intervals and that people are processing languages at various rates and adjusting the pace of the conversation. And so this is allowing for people to get it at different times and not, have such a structured timeline of how everything will go and when you do it, and you know what we normally work out of the model and system that we have had, but allowing people to process the language and the knowledge at the various rates. And so adjusting the workload as well as what is expected, the student expectations from this. Crip time is very interesting, and I've read some about it, and sometimes it seems hard to see how it happens in reality, but how Kubrick did it was basically, we're here to learn and we're going to learn, and when it's over, we're done. And so it was very, very open, without what you would normally consider your student expectations for the course. But now we're going to look into some different domains: the listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and some things that can help in those different areas. Mhm. Okay, so looking at our reading, we have the personalization for that cognitive load and the student agency. So always offering, if you can, student choices to, like, they can enable or disable the subtitles. Let also, yeah, changing the fonts. Allow students to make a copy, automatically open up this slide deck and have it automatically make a copy so that they can change the colors and the font sizes that works for them. There's also a dyslexia font that makes it easy. It looks very different, but it almost looks like the letters are heavier at the bottom. It's hard to describe, but it makes it more readable, gives it higher readability for students who do have dyslexia. Also, using visual cues, such as pictures or realia will enhance the vocabulary lessons. That is across the board. ESL teaching, or early childhood teaching, but this is, again, can help to drive it home for your neurodiverse language learners. Also, working with understanding what they're reading, a good idea would be to work with some annotation tools, and these are just a couple of examples here. They don't pay me or anything. These are just some that people have told me about or I have used. I used Hypothesis in a class and I liked it better than going in and posting and then responding to someone's post. Like, we would be reading the article together and we would make notations and ask questions as we were reading as a student. But so this can be used individually or as a class. But these tools can help with the student or help them understand when they're not understanding something. And even since I originally made this presentation, there's many things that AI has to assist, chunk your work, your reading, or things like that. Changing level, changing complexity. There's specific teaching tools that do that, then also probably any general AI drive would do it. Okay, and then still on reading, for dyslexia, um, you can also work with text to speech. With natural readers free. And again, these have even developed since I made this a year or so ago. But the Read and Ride is a subscription. It's $100 a year. Voice Stream Reader. These are just some other screen reader. So there's many different ways. And even I think your new Google update does more just read this to me. So getting things to read to you, or capture the reading in the dyslexia font. It looks very, very different, and I can include a snap of that. Okay, I have it on a library site. So there's non-visual access. This is to technology, to different really cool things that they can work with, listening. And of course, this helps with language learners as well, learning the language, um, regarding neurotypical or neurodiverse. But then having this extra step can help to them to listen and then read, or if they can, if it works for them, then to do both at the same time. This one at the bottom, the NV access is for visually impaired, but it can also be used. It is also recommended for dyslexia students, dyslexic learners. And then when listening, interactive listening activities are already our big part of ESL education, but having this, letting the students again have that agency to pause, slow it down, rewind, and things like that. When a student is in a classroom, especially if it's online, there's a couple of tools. The CRISP AI is to help with noise cancellation and provide meeting notes and transcription. If some classrooms do not allow any AI, but this is a way that will help them to really focus on what's happening. But this can help the student concentrate on the speaker. Also, breaking down, like segmenting or chunking, breaking down longer audio content into shorter chunks, and just provides less of a listening stimulus to process all at one time, and so it can be less overwhelming. Graphic organizers are good for notes to make sure we want to model on how to use them to develop their second language listening skills. And the students can complete the process, save it for future reference. So Zoom is, there's a lot of tools for communication, but there's a few other little tips or tricks like the instructor may say, okay, give me a signal that, like a signal when the student is struggling with the listening, some simple messages that they can post to the instructor that they can throughout the lesson if the student becomes distracted or was overwhelmed. So maybe they could just at some point in the chat put, and it can be just from the student to the instructor, just put a R for repeat. And so the instructor could then, rephrase what they said or repeat when appropriate. But if it seems that this hinders the class progress, then the instructor can provide the student with the video and the timestamps that the student indicated they needed something repeated. So, if they kind of for whatever reason miss part of it, they're making you train them in advance. Okay, hit R, and of course there's signals, hands up, things like that they know, but to make sure that those are taught explicitly before the lesson on how to communicate. A lot of this will, the more modeling and explicit teaching, especially if it is in a Zoom or some online class, that will be helpful for your neurodiverse learners who may need the explicit instruction on how we proceed with this class. And then, like I said, the little tip of like, if they miss something or if there was too much stimulation or whatever the situation was, if they just put R, then they'll know where they need to go back and focus. Then looking at speaking, and this is similar, those clear expectations for when to speak. This will also help them if they understand what is expected. That'll help them to build confidence. When are we to contribute? Strategies for instruction can be providing opportunities for structured interactions. And I have at the bottom, that is my strategy of the year, QSSA. That is a structured conversation. They can also, again, you can give visual cues for when to speak and when not to speak. Examples can be hand signals, gestures, pictures, photos, timelines, outlines, those kinds of things. And again, the struggling with the how to navigate the social dynamics and the interactions and turn taking can impact their language learning as well as their speaking development. But if you can scaffold some of that communication, it can help ease the student into some difficult situations for interacting. This scaffolding includes delivering clear conversational guidelines for in-person or online communication. You can provide sentence stems or like a sentence with a blank and have them fill in the blank depending on how well their English is. This is this is specific to their English proficiency level, at what level of scaffold or support that you would provide. You can provide words to begin a sentence, they complete them. You can give them a word bank, to what they might want to put in there. So those are some guidelines or some ideas for speaking. And then my strategy of the year is QSSA. Question is you give a question to everyone in the class. This is tier 1, as we say. It's for everyone in the class. You're not just going to say, okay, you 3 that are language learners or you 3 that are. So this came from the ESL. It's an ESL strategy. Okay. You give them, and then they give you a signal. Thumbs up when you're done, pencils down when you're done, when you can answer the question. Okay. When you can complete the sentence. And here is your stem. Okay. What were the ideas that Locke held? Your stem is John Locke believed that people, and so they can use that stem. The language is started for them and they need to find the answers and finish it. And then if you're in person, like who shares? The person with the longest hair, or the part, it can just be partner A, partner B. Partner A shares first, or, however you want to share. And in a classroom, wherever, like if it's in person, a brick and mortar classroom, what I love about this is everybody talks. It's not just what were the ideas that Locke held, and only two people raise their hand, and I pick one of those two every single time. This is everybody talks and everyone is engaged. Everyone talks with their partner. Okay. And then after that, then I'm just going to do a quick spin the wheel, pull a popsicle stick, call on, number one at the table, whatever it is. I do a quick assess. That's the A of, a few. And I'm walking around seeing, making sure everybody's sharing. But it makes a very safe place to share out. It can be used from kindergarten all the way up, and it can be used across the board from English class to math, science, and we are using it everywhere all the time because it's an excellent strategy, and it's gets everyone. That this is what we're seeing in K-12 education is everyone needs to practice speaking. Everyone needs the opportunity to speak. The dialogue and speaking development is not what it should be. So that is also good. So that strategy will go for anyone, but it's a good one also to give extra support for your neurodiverse learners with the sentence stems. And again, if they can, if they're not quite ready to do the share or the assess, this is where you as a teacher would know strategically who to partner with them with, and then if or not you want to call them out to speak in front of everyone. And you may have somebody that likes to speak, so you teach them, well, that we're going to be taking turns. And again, this is again with some sentence stems and collaborative writing, but we're looking at the writing part of the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we have we want to make sure that we're sharing really clear examples of what is good writing and discussing why it works. Give some very, when they write, give very clear and specific feedback and along examples of models of how to improve very specific areas of the writing. Depending again on their proficiency level, you don't want to get the red pen out and tear up the whole page. But if they're, if they're new, you want to focus on a skill in their writing that you want them to improve, and work on that at that point. And then you also, when you're giving your feedback, it's not always just written. Give it in multiple forms, or even you can elicit, what is your interest? How would you like it? I can give you your feedback audio. I can just talk to you. I can write it. We could do both written and spoken. These are good ways to provide the feedback or different options. And it can also help with the student is struggling to understand some of the social cues. You can provide a video with the feedback with an option for the student to read the transcript. And if they're a very beginner learning the language, they may need to have the transcript in their own language. So there's different options. Consider the teacher providing different formats of feedback to the writing. And then, give them some rubrics with some specific and clear criteria and some checklists. And collaborative writing may or may not work depending on the individual and how well, that could be a struggle. Could induce some anxiety, but the more frequent that we work on collaborative writing, it'll help them learn the language by negotiating with others. Um, so we want to make sure that we can help with any of these challenges by, again, doing some very clear modeling on how to work together. Um, if necessary, when we're working on if it is a collaborative writing, giving some flexible deadlines, um, to model and explain how to divide the roles. That even if you're working with a college age student, you may want to still give some of this explicit instruction that it seems like they would know by now. But if they struggle with, you know, communication and worry about misunderstandings and coordinating with their group members, it might be good to provide a bit more of a structure. And here is just some examples of some sentence stems for agreeing or disagreeing with other people, um, that can be used in speaking and then developed into writing. The four domains, listening, speaking, reading, writing, they can all be, of course, woven together, working with some speaking, reading, writing, listening. Many activities involve all of those. This is a extra bonus video that we're not watching, but this was again the Gestalt language processing. It's a little bit longer, but I had it in a video that I did for another class or in a slide deck that I did, and I think it's just it's still pretty short. I think it's only a couple of minutes, but she is a speech language pathologist, and she's they just kind of walk through kind of. So from the first round of things that I added some stuff to my presentation. This was about the early years, and then this was all about the Gestalt language processing and the debate, and then all of these are the resources from the original paper and presentation that I did. Yeah, that's it.